Wind moves through colonnades in a city that has gathered the world's knowledge into stone. Torches flicker, a door closes. On a marble table, the human body lies still. Two shadows lean in, not butchers, not priests, but mathematicians of flesh. In Alexandria, where ships bring papyrus and pepper and star tables, Herophilus and Erasistratus open the body to read what the poets could only sing. If there was a moment when medicine turned from rumor to evidence, it was here. How did two physicians come to dissect humans in a world that often forbade it? What did they actually see? And how did it change what we are allowed to know about ourselves? The year is roughly 300 BCE. Alexander the Great is dead, and his empire fractured among his generals. In Egypt, Ptolemy the Sewer Soter builds a new capital on the Nile's mouth and gives it a singular mission: to collect every book, rival even Athens, and fold scholarship into statecraft. At the heart of this new Alexandria stand two monuments to human intellect: the Mausoleum, a kind of research academy and sanctuary for scholars, and the library, the greatest archive the ancient world had ever imagined. Around them, knowledge accelerates. Euclid codifies geometry. Eratosthenes measures Earth's circumference. Aristarchus dares to place the sun at the center. And from the island of Pharos, a lighthouse taller than kings declares that this city intends to see. Before Alexandria, medicine had been a craft, part ritual, part household art. Hippocratic writings had urged natural causes for disease, but the body's interior remained speculation. Dissection was taboo, forbidden by religion and custom alike. The dead were sacred. To cut them was to desecrate them. Most knowledge came from animal dissection or battlefield wounds, with the rest guessed or imagined. But Ptolemaic Alexandria changed the rules. Here, under royal protection and in service of prestige, the state granted an unprecedented privilege: access to human bodies, usually condemned criminals, for scientific study. Within these marble halls, curiosity met authority, and for the first time in history, the dissection of the human body was not only permitted, it was encouraged. Herophilus, born around 330 BCE near Byzantium, arrived in Alexandria as both physician and philosopher. Calm, methodical, and driven by an almost reckless curiosity, he brought to medicine a mathematician's discipline: the belief that what is unseen must be seen to be understood. When Herophilus opened the body, he redrew the map of humanity itself. For centuries, philosophers like Aristotle had placed the seat of intelligence in the heart, but Herophilus, through careful observation, dethroned the heart and crowned the brain as the source of thought and sensation. He distinguished the cerebrum from the cerebellum, charted the brain's ventricles, and even identified a structure at the floor of the fourth ventricle he called the calamus scriptorius, the writing pen, because its shape reminded him of a stylus. Tracing the optic nerve, he described how sight emerged not from mystical fire, but from nerve pathways. He noticed that nerves branched like trees throughout the body, carrying sensation and motion. No one before him had so clearly distinguished nerves from tendons, nor separated those that carry feeling from those that command movement. In the chest, he recognized differences between arteries and veins, seeing that they were not identical conduits, but distinct structures. In the abdomen, he named the duodenum. At the back of the skull, he mapped the confluence of veins that would later be called the torcular Herophili. His studies of the reproductive system introduced new terms and clarified the structures of the uterus, ovaries, and prostate. But perhaps his most poetic contribution came through the pulse. Herophilus observed its rhythms as if reading a code. Using a water clock, he measured the beats of life against the passage of time, a primitive yet profound form of chronometry. In this act, he linked biology to mathematics, beginning the long story of physiology as a science of measurement. Herophilus was not simply an anatomist. He embodied a method: define clearly, measure precisely, distrust tradition, and test again. A generation later came Erasistratus of Ceos, born around 304 BCE. Where Herophilus had been the patient cartographer of the human form, Erasistratus was the engineer. He saw the body as a living mechanism, an intricate system of valves, chambers, and flows. He studied the heart with a craftsman's eye and declared it a pump, not the throne of emotion, but an engine driving life. Examining its chambers and valves, he realized they worked like one-way gates, guiding the movement of blood. Working within the Greek concept of pneuma, the life breath or vital spirit, he proposed that veins carry blood while arteries carry this pneuma in healthy bodies. When injury allows blood to enter arteries, he reasoned, it does so through fine invisible channels, what we today would call anastomoses, a breathtaking intuition that anticipated the discovery of capillaries nearly 2 millennia later. Though his model was imperfect, his logic was revolutionary. He imagined the body as a system of pressures and circuits, where form and function were linked by laws, not magic. He even opposed the popular practice of bloodletting, arguing that disease could often be managed by diet, exercise, and posture, rather than ritual drainage. Erasistratus also left behind one of medicine's most famous case stories. In the Seleucid royal court, a young prince named Antiochus lay dying. No physician could help him, but Erasistratus observed that the prince's pulse quickened and his face flushed only when Stratonice, his stepmother, entered the room. The physician concluded that the prince was lovesick, a diagnosis at once daring and humane. When the king gave Stratonice in marriage to his son, the prince recovered. Whether the story is myth or fact, it reveals a new kind of medicine, one that listens to the body as it reveals the emotions of the mind. If Herophilus made anatomy visible, Erasistratus made physiology think. Ancient sources agree that both men dissected human bodies in Alexandria, an act almost unthinkable elsewhere. But a darker question lingers. Did they also perform vivisections, experiments on the living? Writers like Celsus and Tertullian, centuries later, accused them of cutting open condemned criminals while they still breathed. These accounts, however, are disputed. No contemporary records confirm such acts, and later moralists may have amplified the horror to cast pagan science as cruel. The truth may never be known. What is certain is that the permission granted by the Ptolemies created an unprecedented opening in the moral landscape of antiquity, a space where the desire to know confronted the fear of transgression. Even without vivisection, the ethical question remains stark. How far should one go in pursuit of truth? Alexandria's answer for a time was clear. Knowledge justified the act. The price was silence from the dead. Before Alexandria, dissection was taboo across the Mediterranean. Knowledge of the body came from animals, wounds, and philosophical speculation. The human corpse was sacred, untouchable. Alexandria broke that barrier. Afterwards, the tide reversed. As Roman customs hardened, the practice of human dissection faded. Galen, the great physician of the 2nd century CE, built his vast anatomical system from animal studies, inferring the human form from pigs and apes. His errors, like the supposed rete mirabile at the brain's base, would persist unchallenged for over 1,000 years. The rise of Christian thought brought new emphasis on the sanctity of the body and the resurrection of the flesh. These beliefs, combined with Roman legal sensibilities, deepened the taboo. Dissection did not vanish entirely, but it retreated into secrecy, suspicion, and myth. Only in the Renaissance, through figures like Vesalius, did Europe reopen the human body to the knife and the eye, restoring the spirit of Herophilus and Erasistratus. Vesalius's great book, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, published in 1543, proclaimed once again that seeing must outrank tradition. The lesson endures, permission, not genius alone, determines the boundaries of knowledge. In Alexandria, dissection was as much performance as procedure. Teachers spoke as assistants cut. Students watched and learned by witnessing. This was the beginning of the anatomical theater, centuries before the Renaissance would build them in stone. Even language became a kind of tool. By naming new structures, the ventricles, the duodenum, the torcular, Herophilus gave physicians a vocabulary for precision. Each word became a handle by which future minds could grasp and move the concept forward. Alexandria was more than a city. It was an idea. A king funded it, a harbor fed it, a lighthouse promised to the sea what the library promised to the mind. We will not lose our way. At dawn, surveyors mapped canals with Euclid's geometry. At noon, astronomers compared Babylonian star tables with the African sky. And at dusk, in tiled rooms cooled with water, physicians like Herophilus and Erasistratus questioned the dead in the only way the dead could answer. Imagine their astonishment, the weight of the brain in their hands, the branching of nerves like winter trees, the gleam of valves that permitted blood to move in one direction only. Outside, poets debated Homer. Inside, they redrew the blueprint of humanity itself. Their achievements were dazzling, but they were not infallible. Herophilus still misunderstood parts of the reproductive system. Erasistratus's theory of pneuma would not endure. Yet their greatness lay not in perfection, but in method, in creating a way of knowing that survives correction. The tragedy of later centuries was not ignorance, but authority. Galen's errors endured for 1,300 years, not because he was foolish, but because he was convincing and uncheckable. When societies close the body, they surrender truth to texts. Even myths surrounding them have purpose. The story of Erasistratus diagnosing love from a pulse anticipates the modern clinic, where emotion and biology intertwine, and the physician must read both signs and souls. Were they heroes or violators? Both. To the families of the condemned, their work was desecration. To history, it was a hinge upon which understanding turned. Science's pages are sometimes written on morally stained parchment. Did Christianity truly ban dissection? Not universally. The ban was cultural as much as theological, a convergence of Roman law, religious reverence, and moral discomfort. Where civic authority permitted, anatomy returned. Why did their discoveries fade? Because permission vanished. Their insights depended on an ecology of tolerance and patronage that Alexandria alone provided. When that system collapsed, so did the freedom to look. What endures? The primacy of the brain, the understanding of nerves as carriers of motion and sensation, the union of observation and measurement, and the conception of the body as a system, a mechanism governed by discoverable laws. Stand again in that room. The night is nearly gone. The harbor air drifts in, salt and herbs and the smell of papyrus. A young student traces a nerve with a bronze hook and feels, perhaps for the first time, that the human being is not ruled by the heart, but by the brain. That sensation is a fabric woven through cords, that we are systems obeying laws older than poetry. This is what Herophilus and Erasistratus purchased with permission, the right to say, "We looked." Because they looked, others would look again. Vesalius, Harvey, Broca, until medicine became less prophecy and more proof. The story is not an apology, nor an indictment. It is a reminder that knowledge requires windows, and that what a civilization chooses to open, or to shutter, determines what its children will ever be able to see. Next, in our History of Science series, Conan the Mathematician. A friend of Archimedes and a counselor to kings, Conan stood at the crossroads of astronomy and geometry. We'll follow his story, from the courts of Egypt to the stars themselves, to see how mathematics became the language of heaven.